There are moments in a person's life that divide everything into before and after. Before the diagnosis and after the healing. Before the loss and after the restoration. Before the breaking and after the rebuilding. You are standing in one of those moments right now, and years from today, when you look back on your life, you will trace the turning point directly back to this day and what God spoke into your spirit through this very message. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, today. Because today is not ordinary. Today is not just another Monday or Tuesday that slips quietly into the past without meaning. Today is a marked day, a selected day. A day that heaven circled long before you woke up this morning, long before you reached for your phone, long before the algorithm or the feed or anything in the natural world could have placed this message in front of your eyes. You did not find this. This found you. And there is a difference so vast between those two things that your mind may not fully grasp it yet, but your spirit already knows. Something inside you recognized this moment before your intellect could name it. That quiet pull, that unusual stillness, that sense that you were supposed to stop and listen, that was not coincidence. That was calling. God does not waste appointments. Every encounter He orchestrates carries weight, carries purpose, carries a transfer of something your life has been waiting on. And what is being transferred into your atmosphere right now, through these very words, is not just information. It is activation. It is declaration. It is a divine signal sent directly to the one who was chosen before the foundation of the world to carry wealth, to steward abundance, and to become a living testimony of what heaven can do when it decides to move suddenly in a human life. You were wired for this. That is not a motivational phrase. That is not a comfortable saying designed to make you feel good for a few minutes before the weight of your circumstances pulls you back down. That is a spiritual fact written into the fabric of who you are. Before your parents spoke your name, before you drew your first breath, before a single day of your life had been lived, the God who created galaxies and breathed life into dust looked at you and said, this one carries the capacity for uncommon blessing. This one has been designed with a reservoir deep enough to hold the overflow I am about to pour out. But here is what so many chosen ones have never been told, and it is the reason why so many of them are still waiting, still straining, still watching others step into what feels like it was meant for them. Being wired for wealth is not the same as automatically receiving it. The wiring exists. The blueprint is real. The assignment has already been written. But there is a moment of preparation, a moment of divine alignment, a season of positioning that must happen before the sudden shift can occur. And that season, beloved, is ending for you right now. Think about the journey that brought you here. Think about the years that felt like they were going nowhere. The seasons where you worked harder than anyone around you and still came up short. The prayers that seemed to rise no further than the ceiling. The dreams that felt like they were dying slowly. In the silence of unanswered waiting, you looked at others who seemed to receive blessing effortlessly. And somewhere deep in a place you may not have wanted to admit, you wondered whether you were truly included in the promise. Whether the abundance that others spoke of was actually available for someone whose story looked like yours. You were not left out. You were being prepared. There is a process in heaven that looks from the outside like delay, but is actually something far more powerful. It is the forging of a vessel. It is the deepening of a foundation. It is God doing in the hidden place what cannot be done in the public place, building into you a character strong enough, a spirit steady enough, and a faith deep enough to carry the weight of what He is about to release. Shallow roots cannot hold great trees, and the tree God is growing in your life is not small. It is not modest. It is not the kind of blessing that comes quietly and goes unnoticed. It is the kind that makes people stop and ask what happened. How did things change so fast? And who is responsible for this? And the answer will always come back to one name. Not your employer, not your investment, not your networking or your strategy or your timing. God, the God who placed the wealth in the earth before humans ever arrived. The God who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills and the silver and the gold. The God who opens doors that no man can shut and shuts doors that no man can open. That God has been watching your faithfulness in the small places, has been counting every sacrifice you made when no one was looking, has been noting every time you chose integrity when compromise was easier. And He has decided that the season of the hidden is over. The shift is coming, and it is coming suddenly. Now hear this and let it settle into the deepest part of your spirit. The word suddenly in the Bible is never used to describe something that merely surprised people. It is used to describe moments when heaven broke through every natural barrier and changed the situations so completely and so rapidly that the only possible explanation was divine intervention. Suddenly the prison doors opened for Paul and Silas. Suddenly the fire fell on Mount Carmel. Suddenly the walls of Jericho came down. Suddenly the widow's oil did not stop flowing. These were not gradual improvements. These were not slow climbs. These were moments where everything changed in an instant because God decided the time had come. Your suddenly is being prepared right now. You were wired for wealth, not because you are perfect, not because you have never stumbled, not because your faith has been without wavering. You were wired for it because God makes His choices based not on your performance, but on His purpose. He chose you before you had done anything good or bad, as the scripture says in Romans chapter 9, verse 11, so that His purpose in election might stand. That purpose is standing today. It has never fallen. It has never been revoked. It has never been given to someone else while you were not looking. It is yours. It has always been yours. And the season of its full manifestation is upon you. Right now, in this moment, I want you to pause and acknowledge this appointment. Not with noise, but with the deep stillness of a heart that recognizes when it is standing on holy ground. Something is shifting in your financial atmosphere. Something is moving in the heavenlies on your behalf. The forces that have held back your blessing are losing their grip, and what is about to be released into your life is going to be so evident, so undeniable, and so beyond what you could have produced on your own, that every person in your life will know that the hand of God was involved. You were chosen for this moment. You were wired for this wealth. And this message is your sign that the shift is not in the distant future. It is near. It is closer than your next breath. It is already in motion. If you believe that God has a financial breakthrough prepared with your name on it, I want you to type the number 7087 in the comments right now. Let that number be your declaration that you are standing in agreement with what heaven is saying over your life today. Type 777 and watch what God does next. And if this message has already stirred something in your spirit, do not let it stop here. Share this video with someone who is believing God for a sudden shift in their finances. Like this video as an act of faith, a declaration that you receive what God is releasing. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, do it now, because every message on this channel is a divine appointment for the chosen ones, and you do not want to miss what is coming next. Type 777 in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. This is your moment. There is something that no one warned you about when it comes to divine blessing. There is something that the prosperity messages often skip over. something that the highlight reels of other people's testimonies rarely show you, and something that the enemy has used for generations to quietly rob chosen ones of the very abundance that was written into their destiny before they ever arrived on this earth. It is not a lack of faith. It is not a lack of prayer. It is not even a lack of obedience. Though all of those things matter deeply, it is something far more subtle, far more persistent, and far more dangerous, precisely because it operates below the surface of your awareness, hidden in the layers of your history, your wounds, your inherited beliefs, and the silent agreements you have made with a version of yourself that was never meant to be permanent. It is the hidden tax on your blessing. Think about what a tax does. A tax does not take everything. A tax does not wipe out the entire account in one moment. A tax quietly, consistently, legally, and systematically removes a portion of what belongs to you before you ever have the chance to fully receive it. You earn the income, but by the time it reaches your hands, it has already been reduced. You were promised the full amount, but something in the system between the source and your hands took a cut. And you may have been living so long under the weight of this invisible tax that you have begun to accept the reduced version of your blessing as the actual full amount. You have begun to live on what is left after the deduction and call it your portion, when in truth, what belongs to you was always far greater than what has been reaching you. Heaven has a full amount with your name on it, and there are forces, both spiritual and psychological, both inherited and self-imposed, that have been intercepting that amount on its way to your life for a very long time. The first of these hidden taxes is the poverty agreement. It is the internal belief, often so deeply embedded that it no longer feels like a belief, but simply feels like reality, that wealth is not for people like you, not for people from your background, not for people with your history, not for people who have made the mistakes you have made or come from the family you came from or lived the life you have lived. This agreement was likely not made consciously. You did not sit down one day and decide to believe that you would always struggle. But somewhere along the way, through enough disappointment, through enough watching the door close, just when it seemed it was opening, through enough hearing the adults in your life speak about money as something scarce and dangerous and out of reach, you allowed a story to be written in the deep places of your mind, and that story has been broadcasting itself quietly into your decisions, your expectations, your prayers, and your posture ever since. The poverty agreement tells you to be practical when God is telling you to be bold. It tells you to lower your expectations when the Holy Spirit is trying to elevate your vision. It tells you that the big dream is not responsible, that the audacious prayer is not humble, that believing for the extraordinary is somehow arrogant, when in truth, believing small when God has written large over your life is the real offense. It is not humility to underestimate what God said He would do. It is unbelief. And unbelief is one of the most effective taxes the enemy has ever collected from the treasury of a chosen one. The second hidden tax is the shame of past financial failure. Many chosen ones carry within them a quiet but crushing weight of guilt and embarrassment over financial decisions they made in seasons of ignorance, immaturity, or desperation. The debt that spiraled, the investment that collapsed, the trust that was given to the wrong person, the years spent surviving instead of building, and instead of releasing those seasons to the redemptive power of God and allowing them to become part of a testimony rather than a permanent identity, they have carried the shame of those seasons forward into every new opportunity, every new open door, every new divine setup. They walk into their breakthrough already half defeated because they do not believe they deserve it after what happened before. But hear the word of the Lord on this matter. Your past financial story is not your final financial story. The God who redeems does not just redeem your soul. He redeems your seasons. He redeems your years. He redeems your losses. The prophet Joel declared in chapter 2, verse 25, that God would restore the years that the locust had eaten, the cankerworm, the caterpillar, and the palmer worm. That was not a promise for a people who had done everything right. That was a promise for people who had watched their harvest be devoured and wondered if it was too late to recover. God looked at that devastation and said, I am going to give you back what was taken. Not a portion of it, not a consolation version of it. I will restore it. That promise has your name on it. The third hidden tax is comparison, and this one is particularly vicious in the age of constant visibility, where you can see in real time what everyone around you appears to be building, acquiring, and celebrating. Comparison does not just steal your joy. Comparison redirects your spiritual energy away from your own assignment and towards someone else's lane. Every hour your heart spends measuring your progress against another person's highlight is an hour your faith is not invested in the specific path God designed for you. And the path God did for you does not look like anyone else's path, because the wealth He has assigned to you is connected to a unique purpose, a unique gifting, a unique story, and a unique set of doors that only open in response to who you specifically are. When you compare yourself to others, you are essentially telling God that His plan for your life is inferior to His plan for someone else's life. But God does not design inferior plans. He does not create second-tier chosen ones. He does not reserve the remarkable transformations for a select few within the select few. Every person He calls fully. Every person He chooses completely. And the wealth He has written into your assignment is not a lesser version of what He gave your neighbor. It is the exact right amount for the exact right purpose that only your life can fulfill. The fourth hidden tax, and perhaps the most overlooked, is spiritual leakage through wrong alignment. The people you are in covenant with spiritually and relationally carry either a draft or a drain on your blessing. There are connections in your life right now that are not neutral. They are either drawing out what God has placed in you, or they are pulling down the atmosphere of expectation that faith requires. You cannot consistently dwell in an environment of doubt, scarcity, cynicism, and spiritual passivity, and expect the full measure of your heavenly assignment to break through without resistance. The environment matters. The voices you allow to speak into your spirit matter. The table you sit at regularly will eventually shape what you believe is possible. God is not asking you to be unkind to those who carry a different spirit. He is asking you to be intentional about where you plant yourself, because chosen ones who are rooted in the right soil, surrounded by the right community, nourished by the right spiritual atmosphere, grow differently than those who are constantly battling the environment they are in just to maintain what little ground they have. Every one of these hidden taxes has been quietly reducing your portion. Every one of them has been taking a cut between the source of your blessing and the moment of your receiving. But the audit is over. Heaven has reviewed the account. And what was intercepted, what was delayed, what was diminished and deducted and held back is about to be released in full. The hidden tax on your blessing is being canceled. The debt owed to your destiny is being called in. And what arrives next in your life will carry the full weight of everything that was supposed to reach you, but was held up along the way. You will not receive a portion. You will receive the whole. You will not receive a consolation. You will receive the original promise, exactly as it was written, exactly as it was intended, and exactly on time. There is a system operating above every system you have ever studied. There is an economy running parallel to every economy the world has ever built. There is a financial order so ancient, so precise, and so unlike anything that Wall Street, Harvard Business School, or any financial institution on this earth has ever been able to fully explain or replicate, and it has been functioning without interruption since the first human hand ever touched a coin or bartered a single possession. It is the economy of heaven. And the chosen one was never designed to be governed exclusively by the limitations of the earthly financial system. You were designed to draw from a source that does not fluctuate with markets, does not panic during recessions, does not dry up in seasons of global uncertainty, and does not operate according to the same cause and effect logic that governs the world around you. Understanding this is not optional for your breakthrough. It is foundational. Because here is what happens to so many chosen ones who are genuinely believing God for a financial shift. They pray in the language of heaven, but they measure in the currency of earth. They ask God for the supernatural, but they only allow themselves to expect the natural. They declare abundance with their mouths on Sunday, and then spend the rest of the week calculating whether the miracle is even logistically possible based on what they can see in the natural realm. And that gap, the gap between their declaration and their expectation, becomes the very opening through which the enemy introduces doubt. And doubt is the one thing that can stall what God has already approved. The economy of heaven does not require your financial situation to make sense before it moves. It does not need your bank account to show a starting balance. It does not need a visible pipeline, a logical explanation, or a reasonable path from where you are to where you are going. The God of heaven created resources from nothing. He spoke light into existence before there was a sun to produce it. He fed a multitude with 5 loaves and 2 fish, not by multiplying what was already sufficient, but by multiplying what was laughably insufficient. He filled jars with oil from a container that should have run dry almost immediately. He brought water from a rock in the middle of a desert. The pattern is consistent and it is unmistakable. God specializes in providing through channels that do not exist until the moment He decides to use them. Your breakthrough may not come from where you are currently looking. This is one of the most important things you need to hear, and it is one of the reasons so many chosen ones miss the very provision God sends them. They are watching one door so intently that they never notice the window He opened on the other side of the room. They are expecting the raise from the job when God has already been preparing an opportunity that has nothing to do with the job. They are waiting for the loan to be approved when God has already assigned a divine connection to cross their path who will carry something that no loan officer could ever offer. The economy of heaven uses unexpected channels, unusual messengers, and unconventional timing because its methods are designed to make one thing absolutely clear. This did not come from human effort alone. This came from God. Consider what happened with a man named Joseph. He was thrown into a pit by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and imprisoned without a fair hearing. By every measure of the earthly financial and social system, Joseph was not on a path to prosperity. He was on a path to complete destruction. But the economy of heaven was running on a different timeline and a different logic. What looked like a series of catastrophic setbacks was actually a precise sequence of divine positioning. Every low place Joseph was taken to was a placement, not a punishment. Every season of waiting was a preparation, not an abandonment. And when heaven decided the moment had come, Joseph moved from the prison to the palace in a single day, not gradually, not through years of slow rehabilitation and public reputation rebuilding. In one day, the entire trajectory of his life changed, because God's economy operates on a timetable that human logic simply cannot predict. Your story is not over. Your trajectory has not been decided by what has happened to you so far. There is something else about heaven's economy that the chosen one must understand, and it is this: the wealth that heaven releases is never purely personal. Every financial breakthrough assigned to a chosen one carries a kingdom dimension. It is not just about your comfort, your security, or your relief. It is about the assignment attached to your abundance. But we will speak more about that in a later portion of this message, because right now what matters is that you understand that the size of the provision God is preparing for you is proportional to the size of the assignment He has prepared for you. And if you have felt your whole life that you were made for something bigger than what your current circumstances reflect, that feeling is not vanity. That feeling is a divine signal. It is the assignment speaking to you from the inside, reminding you that there is more, that you were built for more, and that more is on its way. Heaven's economy also operates on the principle of seed time and harvest, and this principle is more precise than any financial instrument ever created by human ingenuity. Every act of faith you have ever taken, every sacrifice you made when it cost you something real, every offering given in a season of your own lack, every prayer spoken in the midnight hour when no one was watching, every time you chose to trust God's word over your circumstances, every one of those moments was a seed. And seeds do not disappear. Seeds do not become irrelevant with time. Seeds that are planted in faith into the economy of heaven accumulate. They gather interest. They grow in the hidden place. And they break through to harvest at the exact moment God determines the season is right. Your harvest season has been declared. The seeds of your faithfulness are ready to yield. The tears you sowed are about to come back as joy. The sacrifice you made in silence is about to be rewarded openly, because that is how the economy of heaven works. What is given in secret, what is trusted in obscurity, what is surrendered in the hidden place, God repays in the open, in a way that leaves no one who knows your story in any doubt about who was responsible for the turnaround. Now, before we continue into the next portion of this message, I want to pause and speak directly from my heart to yours. This channel exists as a ministry, a place where the Word of God is spoken over the lives of chosen ones every single day. If this message has spoken to your spirit today, if it has stirred something in you, encouraged you, or brought you closer to the truth of what God has said over your life, and you feel led to help us sustain and continue this work, we have placed a support link in the description below. Everything given is completely voluntary, and whether you are able to give or not, we are genuinely grateful that you are here, listening, and walking this journey with us. And if this message has blessed you today, would you take just a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to this channel if you have not already done so. Every share plants a seed in someone else's life, and you may never know how far the reach of your one simple action will go. The economy of heaven is already moving on your behalf. Do not reduce its power by measuring it against what you can currently see. There is a word that appears in the Bible with a frequency that most people overlook. A word so small and so ordinary on the surface that it is easy to read past it without stopping to consider the theological and spiritual explosion it contains every single time it appears. That word is suddenly, and if you will take the time to trace it through the pages of Scripture, from the earliest books to the final revelation, you will discover that suddenly is not a casual descriptor. It is not a literary device used simply to make stories more interesting or narratives more dramatic. Suddenly is the signature of God. It is the watermark of heaven pressed into the moments of human history where the divine broke through the natural with such force, such speed, and such totality that everything in the aftermath looked completely different from everything that came before. You need to understand the suddenly principle because it is the principle that governs the financial shift. That is, approaching your life right now, the world teaches you to think in terms of gradual progression, step by step, year by year, level by level. You earn a little, you save a little, you invest carefully, you wait patiently, and over decades. If all the variables align and nothing goes catastrophically wrong, you may arrive somewhere near the life you envisioned when you were young enough to still dream without reservation. That is the world system. That is the earthly timetable. And there is nothing wrong with wisdom, with diligence, with saving and planning and building carefully. God honors faithfulness in the practical details of life. But there is an entirely different track available to the chosen one, a track that does not replace wisdom, but transcends the natural ceiling that wisdom alone can reach. It is the track of divine suddenness, and it does not operate on the same timetable as the world's system because it is not powered by the same source. Suddenly is what happened. In Acts chapter 2, verse 2, when the early disciples were gathered in the upper room in prayer, they had been waiting. 10 days of waiting after Jesus had ascended. 10 days of prayer, of fasting, of seeking, of holding together in faith when everything around them was uncertain, and the mission they had been given seemed impossibly large for the group of ordinary people they were. And then, suddenly, a sound came from heaven like a rushing mighty wind, not slowly, not in stages, not after gradual warming of the spiritual atmosphere. Suddenly, and in that moment, everything changed. The power they had been promised arrived in full. The assignment that had seemed impossible became unstoppable. The people who had been hiding behind locked doors moved into the streets and turned a city upside down by the end of the same day. 10 days of waiting. One moment of suddenly, and the trajectory of an entire movement changed forever. Now bring that pattern into your personal story. Think about the waiting you have done. Think about the prayers you have prayed, the faith you have maintained through confusion and disappointment, the mornings you got up and chose to believe again even when the evidence in front of you suggested that nothing was changing. That waiting has not been wasted. That waiting has been accumulating. Every day of genuine, faith-filled waiting is a day of preparation being completed in the unseen realm, a day of alignment being made, a day of the circumstances and connections and resources being arranged by God into a configuration that will allow His suddenly to break through with maximum impact and maximum effect. Because this is what most people do not understand about God's suddenly moments. They look instantaneous from the outside. They look like they arrived from nowhere. They look like pure spontaneous miracle with no backstory and no buildup. But in the unseen realm, every suddenly has a before. Every moment of divine breakthrough is preceded by a season of divine preparation that the human eye cannot see and that the human timetable cannot measure. The oil that did not run out for Elijah's widow did not suddenly become miraculous the moment she poured it. The miracle was already in motion the moment she chose to obey. The walls of Jericho did not suddenly fall on the 7th day without the 6 days of silent, obedient marching that came before. The suddenly was the visible eruption of an invisible process that God had been conducting all along. Your invisible process has been running longer than you know. There is a moment that is building in your life right now. It is not visible yet. It may not feel close. The circumstances around you may still look exactly as they have looked for months or even years, unmoved, unchanged, resistant to every effort you have made to shift them through natural means. But do not mistake the silence for absence. Do not mistake the stillness for stagnation. The silence before a suddenly is not emptiness. It is compression. It is the drawing back of the bowstring before the arrow is released. It is the gathering of the wave before it crests. It is the final moments of pregnancy before the birth that changes the entire identity of a family. Something is being compressed in the spirit right now on your behalf, and when it releases, the speed and the scope of what changes in your life will leave you breathless. The biblical pattern of sudden wealth transfer is documented with a consistency that cannot be dismissed as coincidence or selective reading. Abraham was already old, already past the natural season of expansion, when God suddenly multiplied him into the wealthiest man in his region. Jacob left his father-in-law Laban with nothing but his wives and his staff, and within a supernaturally short period of time, he had accumulated flocks and herds and servants and resources so abundant that Laban and his sons could no longer ignore or deny what was happening. Solomon asked for wisdom, and God suddenly added to it a level of wealth and honor that no king before or after him in Israel ever matched. Ruth went from gleaning leftover grain at the edges of a field as a destitute foreign widow to becoming the wife of the most prominent man of means in Bethlehem in a season so short it could barely be called a transition. None of these stories followed the world's logic. None of them built slowly through decades of incremental improvement. All of them have the fingerprint of divine suddenness written across them, and all of them began with a person who was in a place of genuine need, genuine faithfulness, and genuine alignment with the Word and the will of God for their life. You are in that place right now. But there is something critically important that the suddenly principle requires of you, and it is something that many chosen ones miss, precisely because the waiting has been so long and the disappointment has been so real. It requires you to remain in a posture of expectation right up until the moment the breakthrough arrives. Not passive waiting, not resigned endurance, active, alert, faith-filled expectation. The kind of expectation that causes you to prepare for what you are believing for before you can see any evidence of its arrival. The kind of expectation that Noah demonstrated when he built an ark before a single drop of rain had fallen. The kind of expectation that the servants demonstrated at the wedding in Cana when Jesus told them to fill the jars with water, and they did it fully, completely, without holding back, even though what he was asking made no logical sense in the moment. Your expectation is an act of faith. Your preparation is an act of faith. The way you talk about your future, the way you think about tomorrow, the way you respond when someone asks you how things are going, all of it either invites the suddenly or delays it. Expectation creates an atmosphere that suddenly can move through. Doubt creates a resistance that even divine breakthrough must work against. So today, in this moment, God is asking you to make a decision. Not a loud decision, not a dramatic decision that you announce to everyone around you. A quiet, deep, settled decision made in the interior of your soul. The decision to stop measuring your future by your past, to stop calculating what is possible based on what you can currently see, and to stand in full agreement with the declaration that heaven has already made over your financial life. The declaration that says your suddenly is not a maybe. It is not a possibility reserved for more deserving people. It is a certainty being prepared for you specifically, timed precisely, and released at the exact moment of God's perfect choosing. The suddenly principle is not a theory. It is a pattern. It is a promise. It is a reality that is moving toward your life with the full momentum of heaven behind it. Stand ready, because when suddenly arrives, it will not wait for you to get ready. It will demand that you already are. There is a moment in every chosen one's journey toward their divine assignment where God pauses the external progression and turns his full attention inward. Not because he has forgotten the promise he made, not because the breakthrough has been reassigned or the blessing has been revoked, but because he sees something in the interior landscape of your life, something in the hidden rooms of your heart and your habits and your relationships and your thinking that, if left unchanged, would either prevent the wealth from arriving or destroy you once it did. And God loves you far too much to release into your hands what your hands are not yet prepared to hold. This is the season of release, and release is not passive. Release is one of the most active, most courageous, and most costly spiritual acts a chosen one will ever be asked to perform. Because what God asks you to release is never easy to let go of. If it were easy, it would have already been gone. What he identifies for release is always something that has been in your life long enough to feel permanent, something that has woven itself so thoroughly into your identity or your daily experience that releasing it feels less like setting down a burden and more like losing a part of yourself. But the truth that heaven needs you to hear today is this: some of the things you are holding on to most tightly are not protecting your future. They are blocking it, and the hand that is clenched around the past cannot open wide enough to receive what God is trying to place in it. The first thing God is calling you to release is the scarcity identity. This is deeper than the poverty agreement we discussed earlier. The scarcity identity is not merely a belief about money. It is a whole way of moving through the world, a way of relating to opportunity, to generosity, to risk, and to possibility that is shaped entirely by an internal conviction that there is never enough and that you must grip tightly whatever little you have. Because letting go means losing everything. People who carry the scarcity identity hoard, not always materially, but emotionally and spiritually. They hoard their energy, their generosity, their trust, and their faith because at the core of their being, they have been trained by difficult experience to believe that abundance is fragile and shortage is inevitable. But you cannot carry the identity of scarcity into the season of abundance and expect to thrive there. You will sabotage what God builds because your internal operating system is still running the program that was written in your season of lack. God is asking you today to release the scarcity identity, not just as a belief to be corrected, but as an identity to be surrendered, laid down at the feet of the one who said in Psalm 23 verse 1, "The Lord is my shepherd, and I shall not want." That is not a statement about having everything you could ever desire in the next 5 minutes. That is a declaration about the nature of the one who leads you. He does not lead his chosen ones into permanent insufficiency. He leads them beside still waters. He leads them into green pastures. He prepares a table for them in the presence of their enemies. The shepherd metaphor is one of abundance, of care, of provision that anticipates the need before the sheep even knows it exists. Release the identity of a person who always lacks. Step into the identity of a person who is led by the God of more than enough. The second release God is calling you to make is harder to name, but easier to recognize when you feel it. It is the release of the relationships and environments that are spiritually incompatible with where God is taking you. Now hear this carefully, because this is not a call to arrogance or to a cold discarding of people who have walked through seasons of life with you. This is not a license to abandon everyone who is not yet where you are spiritually. But there are connections in your life right now that are not merely neutral. They are actively opposing your forward movement. There are voices speaking into your life that carry a consistent spirit of doubt, discouragement, and limitation. There are environments you return to regularly that drain the spiritual momentum you build when you are alone with God. And every time you leave those spaces, you spend days recovering the ground you lost in a single evening. God is not asking you to hate these people. He is asking you to be honest about the spiritual cost of continued close alignment. Because chosen ones who are on the edge of a major wealth transfer are also on the edge of a major spiritual battle, and you cannot afford to go into that battle carrying the weight of connections that were never meant to be load-bearing structures in your life at this level. And this season, release with love, release with prayer. But release, the third release, is the one that perhaps cuts the deepest, and it is the release of the timeline you built for your own life. The age by which you expected to have arrived somewhere financially. The deadline you set in your mind for when the breakthrough should have happened. The internal contract you wrote with yourself years ago about what your life would look like by now, and the grief and the shame and the quiet desperation that has accumulated in the gap between that imagined timeline and the actual one you have lived. That grief is real. God is not dismissing it. The disappointment of deferred hope is one of the most painful experiences a human heart can carry, and the scripture acknowledges it plainly in Proverbs chapter 13, verse 12, when it says that hope deferred makes the heart sick. Your heart may be sick right now from the weight of a timeline that did not go as planned. And God sees that sickness. He is not indifferent to it. But He is also asking you today to release the timeline you wrote and trust the timeline He is writing. Because His timeline does not just get you to abundance. His timeline gets you there whole. His timing does not just give you the wealth. It prepares you to keep it, to multiply it, to use it in a way that fulfills the assignment, and not just the desire, and to carry it without it carrying you. The fourth release, and this one is specifically financial in nature, is the release of financial fear through an act of radical generosity. There is a principle in the kingdom of God that is both simple and profoundly counterintuitive. The way to break the spirit of financial lack over your life is not to hold tighter to what you have. It is to release something in faith, not recklessly, not manipulatively, as though you are trying to perform a transaction with God that obligates Him to bless you, but from a place of genuine trust, genuine surrender, and genuine alignment with the principle that Jesus Himself stated in Luke chapter 6, verse 38. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. The act of giving in a season of your own need is one of the most powerful spiritual declarations a chosen one can make. It declares to heaven and to the enemy that you are not governed by fear. It declares that you trust the source more than you trust the supply. It declares that your God is big enough to replenish what you release and to return it multiplied in a form far greater than what left your hands. What is God asking you to release? Today, sit with that question, not in anxiety, not in dread, but in the quiet, honest space of a heart that is genuinely willing to let go of what was never meant to stay in order to receive what was always meant to come, because the coming wealth has requirements. Not requirements born of a harsh and demanding God who is looking for reasons to withhold. Requirements born of a loving Father who knows exactly what your hands need to look like before He places the fullness of the promise in them. Open hands receive. Clenched hands cannot release, is not loss. Release is preparation. Release is the final movement before the receiving, and what you release today in faith, you will not miss tomorrow in abundance. There is a language that heaven speaks in the weeks and days and hours before a major breakthrough arrives in a chosen one's life. It is not always loud. It is not always dramatic. It often does not come through the channels you would expect or in the forms you would recognize if you were not paying close attention. But once you learn to read it, once you become familiar with the signs and the signals and the quiet markers that God places along the path of the chosen one who is approaching their moment of sudden shift, you will never again be able to look at your life circumstances the same way. What once felt like frustration will begin to feel like positioning. What once felt like delay will begin to feel like preparation. And what felt like confusion will begin to feel like the last few moments before an extraordinary clarity breaks through. God leaves signs, and right now, He has left them all over your life. The first sign that your wealth transfer is close is an unusual and intensified spiritual hunger. Not the ordinary desire to read a verse or attend a service out of routine or obligation. Something deeper, something more urgent. A pulling toward the presence of God that feels less like discipline and more like thirst. The kind of thirst that wakes you in the night, that draws you back to prayer when the day has been long and the flesh has every reasonable excuse to rest. When a chosen one begins to experience this level of spiritual hunger, it is almost never random. It is almost always the sign of an approaching season where the spirit is being prepared to carry something it has not carried before. Hunger precedes harvest. The deeper the hunger, the greater what is coming. If you have been feeling an unusual pull toward God in recent weeks, if you have found yourself seeking His presence more intensely than you have in a long time, do not dismiss that as mere emotion or spiritual sentimentality. Receive it as a sign. Heaven is preparing you from the inside for what is about to arrive from the outside. The second sign is what many chosen ones experience as a strange and sometimes uncomfortable restlessness. A sense that the current season is ending. A sense that the familiar structures and routines and even relationships of your life no longer fit quite the way they used to. Like a person who has grown suddenly and finds that the clothes that fit perfectly just a few months ago are now too small and too tight and no longer suit the person they are becoming. This restlessness is not a spiritual problem to be solved. It is a spiritual signal to be read. It is the sign of expansion pressing against the boundaries of a season that has served its purpose and is now ready to close. Do not try to settle the restlessness by forcing yourself back into the old container. The discomfort you feel is the discomfort of becoming. It is the sign that you have outgrown the previous season and that the next one is not just possible but imminent. The third sign is the sudden and often unexpected closing of doors that you had been trying to force open. This one is the most counterintuitive of all the signs, because in the moment it feels like failure. It feels like rejection. It feels like confirmation of everything the enemy has been whispering about your value and your future. But when God closes a door in the season immediately preceding a major breakthrough, He is not rejecting you. He is redirecting you. He is removing from your path every option that would have satisfied you at a lower level so that you have no choice but to walk toward the higher thing He has been preparing all along. Every closed door in recent memory that hurt you, every opportunity that fell through at the last moment, every plan that collapsed after you had invested faith and time and energy into it, may not have been the enemy blocking your blessing. It may have been God protecting you from a detour that would have cost you years and delivered you somewhere far less than what He intended. The door that closed was not your destination. It was a distraction from your destination, and God, in His mercy, shut it before you could settle inside it. The fourth sign is an increase in spiritual opposition. When warfare intensifies, it is almost never because the enemy has decided to attack a life that poses no threat to his kingdom. The enemy does not waste resources on people who are going nowhere. The increase in pressure, the increase in spiritual attack, the increase in the intensity of the battle you are fighting is itself a form of confirmation that you are close to something significant. The opposition is proportional to the assignment. And if the assignment attached to your abundance is as significant as God has been preparing it to be, then the warfare surrounding the final stretch of your journey to it will be correspondingly intense. Do not be discouraged by the warfare. Be informed by it. The fifth sign is a series of small but undeniable divine confirmations. Numbers that appear repeatedly in ways you cannot fully explain. A word spoken by a stranger that lands with the precision of a prophecy. A scripture that seems to leap off the page and address your exact situation with an accuracy that feels personal rather than general. A dream that carries a weight and a clarity that ordinary dreams do not have. These are not coincidences. These are breadcrumbs left by a God who knows that His chosen ones need reassurance in the final stretch, who understands that the last mile of a long journey is often the hardest, and who, in His faithfulness and His tenderness, leaves markers along the path to say, "You are on the right road. Keep walking. It is closer than it looks." All of these signs are pointing in one direction. Toward you, toward this season, toward the sudden shift that is already in motion on your behalf. Now, I want to pause here and speak to you from a place of complete honesty and genuine heart. This channel exists solely to carry this message to chosen ones around the world. I want you to know that this channel has had its monetization removed by YouTube, but that has not stopped this work, and it will not stop it, because this ministry is not built on platform approval. It is built on purpose. These videos continue to be made not for income, but for the one who needs to hear exactly this word at exactly this moment. If this message has reached you at the right time, if it has spoken something into your spirit that you needed to hear today, and if you feel led in your heart to help keep this work going, I want you to know that there is a support link in the description below and in the pinned comment. Every contribution, whether large or small, goes directly into sustaining this ministry so that more chosen ones can receive this word. There is no pressure and no obligation. This message was prepared for you, regardless of whether you give anything at all. But if God stirs your heart and you want to be a part of keeping this going, we receive that with deep gratitude. And if you have been blessed today, would you like this video? Share it with someone whose breakthrough is as close as yours, and subscribe so that every new message finds its way to you the moment it is released. The signs are all around you. Heaven is speaking, and the wealth transfer is closer than your circumstances are telling you. There is a question that most prosperity messages never ask, and the absence of that question has left an entire generation of chosen ones confused about why the blessing they received did not stay, why the open door they walked through eventually led to a room that felt emptier than the place they came from, and why the financial shift they experienced did not produce the peace, the purpose, and the fullness they had expected it to bring. The question is this: what is the wealth for? Not in a general sense, not in the abstract language of being a blessing to others or leaving a legacy, though both of those things are true and important, but specifically, precisely, and personally, what is the wealth that God has written into your destiny, actually assigned to accomplish in the world through your particular hands, your particular story, your particular gifts, and your particular position in the body of Christ and in the generation you were born into. Because the answer to that question is not the same for every chosen one. And the failure to discover it, to wrestle with it, to sit before God until He reveals it with specificity and clarity, is one of the primary reasons why financial breakthroughs do not always produce the transformation they were designed to carry. Wealth without assignment is wealth without an anchor, and wealth without an anchor drifts. It drifts toward comfort that becomes complacency. It drifts toward excess that becomes emptiness. It drifts toward a version of success that looks impressive from the outside, but feels hollow from the inside, because it was never connected to the purpose that was supposed to give it meaning. God does not release kingdom resources without kingdom intention. Every financial breakthrough that originates from the throne of heaven carries a purpose inside it, the way a seed carries the identity of the tree it was designed to become. The abundance is not the destination. The abundance is the vehicle. It is the fuel for an assignment that God designed before you were born. An assignment that only you can fulfill, because it requires the specific combination of who you are, what you have been through, where you have been placed, and what you carry in your spirit. Think about this carefully. God did not bless Abraham with extraordinary wealth simply so Abraham could enjoy a comfortable life in the ancient Near East. The blessing on Abraham was attached to a covenant, a purpose so vast that God described it in terms of all the families of the earth being blessed through Abraham's lineage. The wealth was a resource for the mission. It funded the journey. It created the influence. It opened the doors in kingdoms and among rulers that would have been closed. To a man without means, the blessing served the assignment, and the assignment was always bigger than the man. God did not give Solomon wisdom and wealth so that Solomon could build a personal empire of comfort and indulgence. He gave Solomon those resources so that he could build a house for the presence of God, establish a kingdom of justice and order, and create a witness to the surrounding nations of what a society that honored the living God could look like. The wealth was an instrument of divine demonstration. When it was used in alignment with that purpose, everything flourished. When Solomon allowed the abundance to drift away from its assignment and toward the appetites of his flesh, everything began to unravel. The pattern is consistent across every story of divine wealth in Scripture. The blessing always carries a burden. Not a burden in the negative sense of a crushing weight, but a burden in the prophetic sense of a divine load, a holy responsibility, a specific thing that God has commissioned this resource to accomplish. And the chosen one, who receives the wealth without accepting the burden, will find that the blessing becomes complicated in ways they did not anticipate. Now here is where this becomes deeply personal for you. The assignment attached to your abundance is already written. It was written before you were born. It was designed to fit your specific history, your specific wounds, your specific areas of gifting and influence and access. The very things you have been through, the hardships that seemed like they would destroy you, the seasons of lack that felt humiliating and hopeless, the areas of your life where you have had to fight the hardest for every inch of ground. Those are not incidental to the assignment. They are central to it. Because the person God is going to use the wealth to reach, to heal, to serve, and to transform is often the very kind of person you used to be, or the very kind of situation you used to be in. Your poverty is not wasted. Your struggle is not wasted. Your years of fighting in the dark, with nothing but faith to hold on to, are not wasted. They are the very credentials that will make you the right voice, in the right room, at the right moment, for the very people that God designed your abundance to serve. The wealthy man who grew up wealthy can inspire, but the man or woman who came from nothing, who survived what should have broken them, who held on when letting go would have been so much easier, and who stood in the open field of their own financial breakthrough with tears streaming down their face because they never stopped believing, that person does not just inspire. That person transforms. That person carries an authority in their testimony that money alone could never purchase and credentials alone could never create. Your story is a weapon, and your wealth will be the platform from which you fire it. But to fulfill the assignment, you must know the assignment. And knowing the assignment requires something that the busyness and the noise of modern life consistently rob from chosen ones, and that is unhurried time in the presence of God. Time not spent making requests or listing needs or even worshiping in the demonstrative sense, but time spent in the deep stillness of a heart that has quieted itself enough to hear the specific, personal, detailed voice of the Father speaking into your spirit about why He made you, what He built you for, and what the wealth He is releasing into your hands is specifically designed to do in the world. This is not a general call to prayer. This is a specific invitation to a specific conversation with the God who designed your assignment before He formed you in the womb. Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5 records God saying to the prophet, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." The word set apart is the word sanctified. It means designated. It means marked out for a specific purpose. You were designated before your birth for an assignment that your life was always supposed to be moving toward. The wealth is not a detour from that assignment. It is the resource that makes the assignment possible at the scale God always intended it to operate. There are people waiting for you, not for a generic version of you who is simply financially comfortable and no longer stressed about bills. They are waiting for the specific version of you that walks into the fullness of the divine assignment, carries the authority of someone who has been through the fire and come out refined rather than destroyed, and uses the platform that abundance creates to speak a word that only your particular story qualifies you to speak. The wealth is coming, but it is not coming empty. It is coming loaded with purpose, loaded with assignment, loaded with a kingdom agenda that heaven has been preparing you for through every season you have lived, every battle you have fought, and every moment of faith you have held on to when nothing in the natural realm gave you any reason to keep holding. Receive the wealth, but receive the assignment with it, because the assignment is why you were chosen, and the wealth is simply God equipping you to do what He always knew you were capable of. There is a reason the final stretch of a long journey is always the hardest. There is a reason that the last mile of a marathon is the mile where the most runners stop. There is a reason that the final hours before a birth are the most intense, the most painful, and the most exhausting of the entire labor. It is not because the destination is uncertain. It is not because the promise has been revoked or the finish line has been moved. It is because proximity to breakthrough activates opposition in a way that distance never does. When you were far from your breakthrough, the enemy was content to simply distract you and delay you. But now that you are close, dangerously close, close enough that the shift could happen at any moment, the nature of the warfare changes entirely. What you are experiencing right now is not abandonment. It is not punishment. It is not evidence that you missed God or that the promise was never real. What you are experiencing right now is the warfare of the threshold. And the threshold is the most contested ground in any chosen one's journey because it is the last place the enemy can stop you before everything changes forever. You need to understand how the enemy operates at the threshold, because his strategy there is different from his strategy in the open field of your journey. In the open field, he uses distraction, discouragement, and delay. He makes the road seem longer than it is, and the destination seem more uncertain than it should. But at the threshold, his tactics shift. At the threshold, he stops trying to make you give up on the destination and starts trying to make you unworthy of it. He stops attacking your belief that the wealth is real and starts attacking your belief that you deserve it. He stops questioning the promise and starts questioning the person. He whispers things like, "Yes, God can do it, but not for someone like you. Yes, He has done it for others, but you have gone too far, waited too long, failed too many times, sinned too deeply, or simply been too ordinary to qualify for the extraordinary that is on the other side of this threshold." These are lies. Every single one of them is a lie, crafted specifically for this moment, designed to stop you within sight of the very thing you have been believing for. And the tragedy is not that the lie is convincing. The tragedy is that it arrives at a moment when you are tired, when your faith has been stretched for so long that it feels thin, when the accumulation of the journey has left you emotionally and spiritually depleted. And in that depleted state, the whisper that you do not qualify lands with a weight it would never have carried in a season when your spiritual reserves were full. But hear the word of the Lord over this moment. Your qualification for the blessing was never based on your performance. It was based on His purpose. The wealth assigned to your name was not assigned because you earned it through perfect obedience. It was assigned because God, in His sovereignty and His foreknowledge, determined before you were born that this resource would be entrusted to your hands for the accomplishment of a specific kingdom assignment. That determination was not made on the basis of your track record. It was made on the basis of His character, and His character does not change. His purpose does not waver. His assignment does not expire. Romans chapter 11 verse 29 states with absolute clarity that the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. That word irrevocable in the original Greek is ametamaletos, which means without regret, without change of mind, without reconsideration. God does not wake up one morning and decide that the calling He placed on your life is now canceled because of what you did last year or last decade, or in the darkest season of your story. The calling stands, the assignment stands, and the wealth that is attached to the assignment stands with it. So when the enemy attacks at the threshold with accusations about your worthiness, your response is not to argue about your performance record. Your response is to point to the unchanging nature of the one who made the promise. Not I deserve this because of what I have done, but I receive this because of what He said and because of who He is. The warfare at the threshold also manifests in the physical realm in very specific and recognizable ways. Unexpected financial emergencies that arrive precisely when your faith is at its highest. Relationships that suddenly become turbulent or complicated just as you are stepping into alignment. Health challenges that arrive without warning to distract your focus and drain your energy. Opportunities that appear attractive but carry a subtle compromise embedded in their terms. These are not random occurrences happening to coincide with your spiritual advancement. These are coordinated attacks designed to either drain the resources you will need to step into the new season, destabilize the relationships God has positioned around you for the breakthrough, or lure you into a counterfeit version of the blessing that will satisfy you at a lower level and prevent you from pressing through to the real thing. The enemy knows that a distracted chosen one is a delayed chosen one, and at the threshold, His primary goal is not to defeat you permanently. His primary goal is to delay you just long enough that you lose the momentum of faith that was carrying you forward. Do not lose your momentum. Not now. Not at this moment. Not when everything you have been believing for is this close. The story of the 10 lepers in Luke chapter 17 carries a word for this exact moment in your journey. 10 men who were suffering from a disease that had separated them from society, from family, from dignity, and from the life they were supposed to be living. 10 men who came to Jesus crying out for mercy, and Jesus did not heal them where they stood. He told them to go and show themselves to the priests, which was the customary act of confirmation performed after a healing had already taken place. He told them to act as though the healing had happened before they had seen a single sign of it in their bodies. He told them to move in obedience before the evidence arrived. And it says that as they went, they were cleansed. Not before they went. As they went, the miracle met them in the movement. The breakthrough arrived in the going, not in the waiting. The healing was released the moment they chose to act on the word, in spite of what their bodies were still showing them in the natural realm. This is the instruction for your threshold moment. Move. Act on the word. Take the step that your faith has been building toward even while your circumstances have not yet reflected the change. The breakthrough is not waiting for your circumstances to align before it arrives. It is waiting for your obedience to move before the evidence gives you permission to move. The evidence follows the obedience. The manifestation follows the movement. The wealth transfer follows the chosen one who refused to stop at the threshold. You have come too far to stop here. Every prayer, every sacrifice, every tear, every morning you chose to believe again when the night had been unbearably long. Every act of faithfulness in seasons when faithfulness felt foolish. All of it has been building to this threshold. All of it has been preparing you for the crossing. And on the other side of this threshold is not just financial relief. It is the full manifestation of the divine assignment that your entire life has been a preparation for. The warfare is intense right now because the victory is real. The pressure is great right now because the promise is greater. The enemy is fighting hard right now because he knows what is on the other side of your yes, your obedience, your refusal to stop, and he is terrified of the chosen one who crosses that threshold with their faith intact. Right now, in this moment, I want you to type these 3 words in the comments below. Just 3 words that declare where you stand in this battle. 3 words that the enemy needs to hear from you today. Type this: I will not stop. Let those words be your declaration at the threshold. Let them be your act of warfare. Let them be the sound of a chosen one who has decided that no attack, no accusation, no exhaustion, and no delay will take them out before they receive what heaven has already approved. Type it now. I will not stop. There is a gap that exists between the promise and the possession, between the declaration that heaven has made over your life and the moment that declaration becomes visible, tangible, and undeniable in the natural realm. And in that gap, in that sacred and often agonizing space between the word spoken and the word fulfilled, there is a work that must be done. Not the work of striving, not the work of forcing and manipulating circumstances into the shape you want them to take, but the work of alignment. The work of becoming in your words, your conduct, your daily choices, and your interior posture, the kind of persons whose life is fully compatible with the blessing that is approaching. Because here is what the gap reveals. It reveals whether the true one is ready not just to receive the wealth, but to sustain it, to multiply it, and to deploy it in a way that fulfills the assignment, rather than simply satisfying the appetite. And what closes the gap faster than anything else in the natural and spiritual realm is alignment. When your confession aligns with God's declaration, when your conduct aligns with your calling, when your daily choices align with the identity of the person you are becoming rather than the person you used to be. When your words, your thoughts, your associations, your habits, and your faith all point in the same direction at the same time, the gap closes with a speed that astonishes everyone who has been watching. Begin with the confession. The scripture is not vague about the power of the spoken word in the life of a chosen one. Proverbs chapter 18 verse 21 states plainly that death and life are in the power of the tongue, and that those who love it will eat its fruit. That is not a metaphor about being kind with your words in conversation. That is a declaration about the creative and destructive power of the human voice when it speaks with faith and intention into the atmosphere of a life. What you say about your financial future is not merely an expression of your current emotional state. It is a seed being planted into the soil of your spiritual atmosphere, and the harvest you are walking toward will be shaped in part by the quality of what you have been sowing with your mouth in the seasons that preceded it. This means that the chosen one who is aligning for sudden wealth must become ruthlessly intentional about their verbal confession, not in a mechanical, formulaic, word-of-faith methodology that treats God like a vending machine, responding to the right combination of spiritual inputs, but in the genuine, faith-rooted practice of speaking in agreement with what God has already said, consistently choosing the language of possibility over the language of limitation, the language of abundance over the language of scarcity, and the language of the future God described over the language of the past that the enemy keeps trying to replay. When someone asks how you are doing financially, what do you say? When you think about the future, what words form in your mind before you have a chance to edit them? When you pray about money, what is the dominant tone of your prayer? Gratitude and expectation, or complaint and desperation? These patterns matter. They are either inviting the breakthrough or creating atmospheric resistance that the breakthrough must push through to reach you. And the chosen one in the final stages of alignment cannot afford to keep sending mixed signals to heaven, agreeing with God's word heard on Sunday and agreeing with the enemy's narrative from Monday through Saturday. Make a decision today about what language governs your life, not based on what you can currently see, based on what God has already said, and speak that language consistently. Even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it feels presumptuous, even when the circumstances around you are screaming the opposite, because the circumstances are subject to change. The word of God is not. Now move from the confession to the conduct. Conduct is where many chosen ones lose the most ground in the final stretch toward their breakthrough, because it is relatively easy to speak the right words. It is far more demanding to live in a way that is consistent with the identity of the person you are declaring yourself to be. The alignment God requires is not just verbal. It is behavioral. It is the alignment of your daily actions with the divine assignment that the coming wealth is supposed to serve. This means stewarding what you already have with a level of intentionality and faithfulness that treats your current resources, however limited they may be, as a training ground for the greater stewardship that is coming. Luke chapter 16 verse 10 contains one of the most important financial principles in the entire New Testament. Jesus said, "Whoever is faithful in very little is also faithful in much, and whoever is dishonest in very little is also dishonest in much." The principle is unambiguous. The way you handle the small is God's measure of how you will handle the large. The faithfulness you demonstrate in the season of limitation is the qualification you are building for the season of abundance. This is not about having a perfect financial track record. If that were the standard, none of us would qualify. It is about the direction of your stewardship. Are you moving toward intentionality or away from it? Are you becoming more faithful in how you manage what God has already placed in your hands? Or are you waiting for the abundance to arrive before you begin treating money as a kingdom resource? Because the person who will not budget a small income will not manage a large one well. The person who gives nothing when they have little will find reasons to give nothing when they have much. The habits of the small season travel with you into the large season, unless they are deliberately and intentionally changed. Begin the habits of abundance now, before the abundance arrives. Give now, even from your lack, as an act of faith and alignment. Save now, even a small amount, as a declaration that you are a steward and not just a consumer. Plan now, as a statement of expectation that there will be more to manage in the season that is coming. These are not just practical financial disciplines. They are acts of spiritual alignment. They are the conduct of a chosen one who has decided to live in agreement with their destiny rather than in reaction to their circumstances. Beyond the confession and the conduct, alignment also requires the posture of obedience in the specific things God has been asking of you in this season, not the general obedience of a believer living a decent life. The specific, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes costly obedience that God has been pressing on your spirit in the quiet moments, the things He has been asking you to do or to stop doing, or to release, or to begin that you have been holding at arm's length because they require more of you than you have felt ready to give. That specific obedience is often the key that unlocks the door, not because God is withholding the blessing as punishment for disobedience, but because the specific thing He is asking of you is usually directly connected to the specific channel through which the blessing is designed to flow. The step of obedience and the breakthrough are not separate events on different timelines. They are connected. The obedience creates the opening through which the suddenly can move. Think of it this way. A dam holds back an enormous volume of water. The water is real. The volume is real. The pressure behind it is real. But until the specific gate is opened, the water stays on the other side. God has been asking you to open a specific gate. He has been pressing on a specific area of your life, asking for a specific act of surrender, a specific step of obedience, a specific release of something you have been holding. And on the other side of that gate is the full force of everything He has been accumulating on your behalf. Open the gate, align the confession, align the conduct, step into the obedience that your spirit already knows is required. Because when every element of your alignment moves into agreement with heaven's declaration over your life, the gap between the promise and the possession does not close slowly. It collapses. And suddenly, the world you have been speaking into existence is the world you are living in. You have traveled a long way to arrive at this moment. Not just through this message, though the journey through these words has itself been a divine appointment. You have traveled through seasons of waiting that tested the very foundation of your faith. You have traveled through years of believing when the evidence gave you every reason to stop. You have traveled through the hidden place of preparation, through the fire of refinement, through the silence of what felt like abandonment, but was actually the most intimate season of divine formation your life has ever known. And you have a here at the final threshold, at the edge of the new season, standing at the place where everything that was spoken over your life in the secret place is about to become undeniably visible in the open place. This is your moment, not a moment borrowed from someone else's testimony, not a moment you watching from a distance and wishing belonged to you. This moment, this declaration, this divine appointment has your name written on it in the language of heaven, and nothing in the natural or spiritual realm has the authority to take it from you. Let the weight of that settle into you. Let it move past the surface of your mind and find its way into the deep places where you have been carrying the accumulated weariness of the journey. Let it speak directly to the part of you that has been holding on by faith alone for longer than you ever expected to have to hold on. Let it say to that weary but unbroken part of you, it was worth it. Every prayer was worth it. Every sacrifice was worth it. Every morning you chose to get up and believe again was worth it. Because what is coming does not just compensate for the difficulty of the journey. It redeems it. It transforms it from a story of suffering into a testimony of the faithfulness of a God who never abandoned the one he chose. The sudden shift that has been the subject of this entire message is not a distant theological concept. It is a present spiritual reality moving toward your life with the full weight of heaven behind it. And as it approaches, there are 3 final declarations that God is asking you to make over yourself, not as a religious performance, but as a genuine agreement between your spirit and the word that heaven has already spoken. The first declaration is this: I am not defined by what I have been through. Say that over yourself right now. Mean it from the deepest place you can access. Because the enemy's final strategy at the threshold is to use your history as a ceiling, to make the weight of your past the defining narrative of your future. But the God who redeems does not allow the broken places of a chosen one's story to become permanent limitations. He takes the very places of greatest damage and turns them into the locations of greatest testimony. What happened to you was real. The pain was real. The loss was real. The years that felt wasted were real. But they are not the final word over your life. They are the setup for a testimony so powerful that it will shake loose the faith of everyone who hears it. The second declaration is this: I receive what God has prepared for me fully and without apology. This matters because many chosen ones who arrive at the threshold of their financial breakthrough unconsciously hold back from full reception. They have been through enough disappointment that they protect themselves from the full weight of hope by only partially receiving the blessing, even when it arrives. They keep one foot in the old season as a kind of emotional insurance policy against the possibility of losing what they just received. But partial reception produces partial manifestation. God is asking you today to receive fully, to open your hands and your heart and your expectations completely, to step into the abundance without the protective reservation of someone who has been hurt before. You have been hurt before, and you survived, and you are here. And that means you are stronger than the hurt was, and you are capable of receiving the full measure of what God has for you without it destroying you if the enemy tries to take it. You are no longer the person who could not withstand the weight of the promise. You are the person who was forged in the fire of the journey specifically so that you could carry it. The third declaration is this: what God releases through my life will reach further than my life. This is the declaration of a chosen one who has fully accepted the assignment attached to their abundance. It is the declaration of a person who understands that the wealth coming into their hands is not just personal provision, but kingdom resource. That the platform the abundance creates is not just for their comfort, but for their calling. That the testimony of their turnaround is not just their story, but a weapon in the hand of God for the liberation of everyone who will hear it and find the courage to believe for their own suddenly. Make these 3 declarations today. Write them down if you need to. Speak them out loud. Return to them every morning until the manifestation is so complete that you no longer need the declaration to remind you of what God said, because the evidence of what He did is surrounding you on every side. Now, before this message closes, I want to speak to you one final time from a place of complete sincerity and genuine love for everyone who has made it to this point in the video. You need to know that this channel exists purely and entirely as an act of ministry. YouTube has removed monetization from this channel, but that decision did not and will not stop this work. These messages continue to be created because there are chosen ones all over the world who need to hear exactly this word. And as long as God gives the vision and the voice, these messages will keep coming. If this message has spoken something real into your life today, if it has stirred your faith, encouraged your spirit, or given you the strength to take one more step toward the breakthrough you have been believing for, and if you feel in your heart that you want to be a part of keeping this ministry going, there is a support link in the description below and in the pinned comment. Whatever you feel led to give is received with deep gratitude and will go directly into sustaining this work so that the next chosen one who needs this word can find it. And if giving is not possible for you in this season, that is completely understood. You are no less valued, no less seen, and no less appreciated for being here. The fact that you stayed, that you listened, that you let these words find their way into your spirit, that matters more than anything else. If this message has blessed you today, would you take just a moment to like this video as a simple act of agreement with what God has spoken? Share it with someone who is standing at their own threshold right now and needs to know that the suddenly it's closer than it looks. And if you have not yet subscribed, please do so now, because every message on this channel is a divine appointment, and you do not want to miss a single one. You are the chosen one. You were wired for this wealth. You have been prepared through the journey. You have survived the warfare. You have aligned your confession and your conduct. And now you stand at the edge of the new season with every spiritual preparation complete and every divine approval in place. The shift is here. Step into it without fear. Step into it without reservation. Step into it as the person God always knew you were, the person the journey was always making you into, the person whose suddenly is not coming. It has already arrived.